For those of you who are watching via StreamYard on all of our socials at Fox PHL Gambler, you will see that in my screenshot right behind me, there's a 8-foot mural of Joel Embiid that has been in my house since basically 2018. There is no doubt about it, and it pains me to say it more and more every year. The Sixers are my number one. Always have, always will be. And they returned this evening, and I'll tell you right now, I'm starting to get a little excited. Yep, you heard it correctly. I'm starting to get a little excited about this upcoming 76ers reasons, and I have three of them listed right here in front of me that I will go over with our next guest. Of course, you know him very well. You hear him on a multiple of a lot of our shows here on the Gambler, including the Phillies post game show. Did a great job on that. Does it all, but he is our Sixers insider. It's his time to shine. All things NBA. Sean Barnard. Sean, good afternoon, sir. How we doing?
Yeah, good afternoon, and I absolutely have that juice. That Sixer season is
Oh, I
here.
know you do. We
Yeah.
know you do.
Yesterday was my lone day of mourning. Phillies is over. It is Sixer season, so I am optimistic about the season. I think much more than the consensus, and I'm excited to dive into everything about this team. And I can't wait to see what they look like on the floor tonight.
Let's start there. You say you are optimistic. Why? What would make you be optimistic about this upcoming season other than the fact it's fresh and it's new?
I'll start with Nick Nurse. I genuinely believe that Nick Nurse is going to be more impactful than any personnel change that could be made within the Sixers organization. And even just watching the brief moments of preseason, they're moving at a different pace. There's more off-ball movement. It looks like modern basketball in a way that we just straight up haven't seen for the past 3 years. And I think that's going to be crucial to unlocking some of these players, the Joel Embiids, the Tyrese Maxey, and this supporting cast of characters that I brought in, that I think there's a real argument that probably outside of that Jimmy Butler 2018-19 season, that this is the deepest team in the Joel Embiid era. So I like a lot of these pieces off the bench, and I think I trust Nurse to make the right decisions, and I think he's got a lot of neat weapons that he can unleash at the right times.
Excellent, because that's number 3 on my list for reasons why I'm excited. Oh, well, excuse me. It's a combination. You said 2 things there. First of all, Nick Nurse, that's number 2 on my list. I'm a Nick Nurse guy. I always have, always will be. For
Yeah.
the people that are wackos when it comes to the NBA, and you are definitely into this or in that equation, but I don't think you're so opinionated to the point that, like, oh, Nick. Point being is that Nick Nurse had many times over the last few seasons where people who claim they are X's and O's gurus, and they're like, Nick Nurse, like, what is he doing? What's he playing? Da, da, da. Like, there was so much bickering about him with the Toronto Raptors. And
Yeah.
look, I'm not going to defend him because I didn't really pay attention, in great detail to everything 1 through 12 for the Toronto Raptors. But we do know is this successful team. He goes about it a different way. He marches to his own beat. Won an NBA championship. Albeit I get Kawhi Leonard couldn't miss a bucket, but still you got to do it. You got to get there and win it. And it just never came off as flukish, right? Sometimes you get these types of managers, these types of coaches in whatever sports it may be, and it might come off as like Gabe Kapler. It came off as flukish, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nick Nurse, it doesn't, right? It comes off strategic, and now he's here, and I think that is a huge upgrade. I don't see anybody out there that would tell us different, that Nick Nurse is not an upgrade over Doc Rivers.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think in kind of both of their progression as head coaches that I think is interesting to note, both guys that have been around basketball forever when talking about Doc Rivers and Nick Nurse, but Doc Rivers is a guy who played in the NBA during his time and then was a head coach pretty much just after his playing career, had a little assistant time, and then has just been a head coach for decades. Nick Nurse, on the other hand, has had all these different experiences. He's coached in England, he's coached in Europe, he's coached at the G League level. And in line with those things, it kind of presents you with some unique challenges that you have to learn as a coach. Situations like, all of a sudden, my 2 best players just got called up to the NBA. I got to figure out how to generate offense with this team. Those kind of situations are very valuable to growing and being more versatile as a coach, learning how to adapt to different situations. And I think really has expanded his brain from a basketball sense for how to handle things. So I'm very excited for this new kind of versatile approach. I expect to see some much more fluent things as far as rotations go, as far as styles of play, and just kind of not the same script on a night-to-night basis in the way that it was with Doc Rivers.
Sean Barnard, you can find him at Sean_Barnard1. That's the number 1. let's pick up with another thing you mentioned there about optimism. And as I said, my number 3 item on the list here is I do think that this is a deep squad. Now, I
Yep.
want to know your thoughts on the bench and how does that play out? Again, we're game 1, so we don't
Mhm.
know exactly what the rotation is going to be, or first guy off the bench or anything along those lines. But if you had to guess, what makes you so confident that you could sit here and say in that opening dialogue right there that, hey, I think that this team is deeper, so much so that it may be even deeper than the year that they had Jimmy Butler?
Yeah, I think the options is the thing, is that like every night's going to present unique challenges, and I think that there's different options on this bench that there wasn't the case before. That it isn't the same story of let's see if Matisse Thybulle can slow down the superstar, or let's see if we can get some sort of spark from Shake Milton off the bench. Instead, there's more options. Like Kelly Oubre, for example, is probably the most true traditional wing that these Sixers have had throughout the entire Joel Embiid era. And no, he's not perfect as a basketball player. He absolutely has his holes, but there will be nights where Kelly Oubre is vital to getting a win. Patrick Beverley is another guy where he can throw in. There will be nights where he makes an impact, where he slows down a guy, and I think is an excellent complement to Tyrese Maxey as a defensive-minded guy. Think about like Furkan Korkmaz is a guy who is probably like the 14th or 13th man on this team, and there was a point in time where he was a 7th or 8th man in the rotation. So that's how much deeper the guys have gotten in front of him, which I think is an optimistic view of it. And there's just like I think there's going to be trying new things. Paul Reed at the 4 is going to be a real thing. He's going to play next to Joel Embiid this year. That's something we have not seen before. That has potential to unlock this team in a further way. Mo Bamba, Philip Petrusev. There's guys that are developing and guys that are just available that weren't before. So to me, there's just more options on this team than have been in years past.
I like that. All right, last one, and my number one reasons why I'm excited more than most Sixers fans. And I don't understand why, because let me take that back. I do understand because there's just a negative sentiment fully around this team and all the players that have been here over the years, right? We just talked about what the new is. Well, there's one constant that is definitely old, and it's the guy behind me. But how dare you talk bad about the league's MVP,
Yeah.
right? Like, is he perfect? No. Is he flawed? He's got his flaws. We understand that. But at the end of the day, every time he takes that floor, he's the best damn player on that court, except in games 5, 6, and 7 in the playoffs. We understand that. I'm not going to argue that. Joel's got a lot to prove to us. And like, I'm not going to tell you that you shouldn't have a sour taste in your mouth about everything that's taken place year after year, losing in the second round. But don't second guess yourself on this guy,
Yeah.
right? People wanted to trade him. Dude, great. I'm happy you guys are putting that out there. You know what? I took notes. I'm sure Joel Embiid did as well. You know he's in tune with what's being said about him,
Oh, yeah.
right? Everything that took place, all that Joker hype and nonsense, he goes on to win an NBA championship. Joel Embiid is simply the butt of every joke that revolves around the NBA, right? For the last 3 to 4 months, and he knows it. And now this Sixer situation with James Harden, it's a disaster to some. I mean, at the end of the day, we've been used to this, right? It's no big deal. Oh, you showed up, you want to fly? Sorry, go home, James. Who cares? Nobody cares.
Right.
Joel Embiid, though, right? Like, I'm excited about what this guy is going to bring to the table this year. If he doesn't have it this year, if something isn't motivating him to another level this year, then of course we got issues. But I fully expect Joel Embiid to come out swinging night one. So much so, I'm taking the Sixers plus the 6 tonight on DraftKings Sportsbook.
I like that. I like that. And yeah, as far as the Embiid point as a whole, where he needs to grow as a player is the talent. There's no doubt. As you said, he's the best player on the floor every single night. But where he needs to grow is the elevating his teammates in the same way that we've seen Jokic take those leaps. Now, Joel is not blameless in this situation whatsoever, but I do think Doc Rivers put him in difficult spots at times by running the offense as essentially a give it to Joel Embiid and everybody else watch. That's a difficult spot to put a player, especially a 7-footer who's trying to create his own shot at the elbow. It's just not that easy. So I do think that there's going to be more movement in the offense. I think his assist numbers are going to grow this year. I think that's a wager that people should be looking at as slamming the Joel Embiid assists. He's averaged 4.2 assists the past 2 seasons. I think he's going to set a career high this year with that number. I think there's going to be a lot more dribble handoffs from 2-man game with him and Maxey that are going to be pretty much easy assists for Embiid to rack up in that direction. But I do believe that we might see some statistical regression when it comes to scoring and things like that. But I think as far as translating to winning, this is going to be the season that we see some significant progress in Joel Embiid. And I see that in the form of both playmaking and defense.
I heard the process where you caught
Leak in
yourself.
there.
You're like, oh, you can't say that anymore. Got to move on from that. No, and look, I'll just keep it real simple. Like Joel Embiid is just a dominant basketball player, and you know he's a guy that can go out there and get you 50. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that, you know, like we just discussed with everything with Nick Nurse, new offense, new rotation, new play calling, all of that. Right. The depth on the bench. Maybe it makes life a hell of a lot easier for Joel Embiid where he doesn't feel like he has to go out there and score 50. I don't know. We'll see. I also do believe that the way that this team is currently constructed is not what it's going to be come January. You pointed this out already, and I did somewhat. I didn't connect the dots like you did. But in Chicago, night one, they're having players meetings. This league is a disaster. It is filled with nothing but nonsense, nothing but bickering. And eventually somebody's going to say, I want out. And when they do, I think that that's going to open up the door of possibilities for James Harden to be moved. And therefore, the Sixers will get somebody. I don't know. James was really good last year. Like let's not knock that, right? Regular season, couple games in the postseason, he was really damn good. I hope we can get somebody on that caliber. If not, maybe there's somebody that's just a tad underneath him from offensively, but brings more on the defensive side. I think that move will make the 76ers better. Honestly, I do. I feel like with Nick Nurse, the next level for Joel Embiid in this season, as far as mentally is concerned, holding the grudge, calling out everybody that was, you know, taking the notes, keeping the receipts that everybody had something to say last year. And oh, by the way, with the strength of the bench, this team is going to take a step forward. Oh, by the way, we haven't even talked about the main piece.
Yeah, and the biggest thing that I want to jump in there, for starters, with the Chicago situation, I mean, the NBA is the greatest reality television on earth. That, like, this is a nonstop every night thing. Chicago's a frustrating spot as a franchise. That I think they made a mistake with the Vucevic re-signing this offseason. They're stuck they're stuck directly in that basketball purgatory of not being quite good enough to compete, but not being bad enough to have an outlet to improve, whether that be free agency through the draft. So I do think that they are approaching blow-up mode. I think they should have addressed that this summer. The two guys that kind of jump out that impact the Sixers here are DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine. And I'll start by saying I do think James Harden makes some sense to the Bulls. That right now Kobe White is their starting point guard. I like Kobe White. He's a fine player, but I don't think he's quite ready to run an offense at the level that needs to be happening. And there's also an appeal to, as much as there's noise and as messy as this is with James Harden, he's a free agent at the end of this offseason, or at the end of this season. So that is an appealing factor from the Bulls for example, Zach LaVine on a 5-year deal. If you want to get rid of that money, clear the books, you framework some sort of LaVine and Harden and obviously other stuff to make this all work. But you're then getting rid of 4 years of contracts. You let Harden and DeRozan walk at the end of the offseason. Both will be free agents. All of a sudden, that's a ton of cap space, and you can kind of start to build from the ground up. So if the Bulls want to hit that reset button, James Harden is in a way to do that. And by the way, it's still a way to keep a little bit of optimism in the franchise that maybe this works out perfectly, that Harden is still capable of keeping a team in that playoff margin, being a guy that can make an impact. And there are a lot of connections here. That LaVine is a guy who trains with Joel Embiid through Drew Hanlon. He's a guy who shares an agency as Maxey, has the same sneaker deal as Maxey, both New Balance guys. And DeRozan is a guy who, if Daryl Morey is that committed to this cap space plan, he's on an expiring as well. So if Morey really has his sights set on that DeRozan fits the description for the type of players he's looking at, I do think it's going to take a couple more weeks at least for this to unwind. But even if the Bulls just show a little bit of interest, that could be enough to spike the Clippers offer as well. So that is why Morey is sitting back at this time. And there's always stuff happening behind the scenes at the NBA.
Hey, no doubt about it. He was right with the Simmons situation to a point, right? We could all go back and be revision Monday morning quarterback times 10 with that deal. Maverick, I got into a conversation last night about it because Ben Simmons and the whole hoopla about him with 8 and 9 again. It's like, dude,
Oh yeah,
he's still
whopping
a
them.
liability on the floor. Nothing's changed. But, my point was, I'm like, hey, at the time, I would have taken other deals, right? I would have maybe traded him to the Kings, maybe went with the Pacers, whatever it was, because I just wanted to get rid of Ben Simmons and start fresh, start new. But guess what? James Harden came in, had pretty good run last year, pretty good run the year before when he was in there for the half of the season. Again, did it translate to a championship? No. But some might say that if you do go back, you got to be happy with the move that Morey sat on his hands, waited, was able to get James Harden. It's hard to argue. It really is. I get it. We can bicker right now and say, I would have taken this player, whatever. But at the time, I think Morey got it right. It's just, hey, you got to wait and see. Got to play this out. Got to be the hard-headed one here. You don't want to play. You don't want to show up. All right, well, we're going to do things our way. That's fine. See ya. But guess what? He's still calling. He's still, making all the calls to all the teams, seeing who's available. And that's just one team we're listing right now with the Chicago Bulls. I don't know. You talk about these teams that have expectations like the Phoenix Suns. I don't know what the Suns have to offer, if they have anything to offer. But I do know this. Kevin Durant looked a little old, right? Doesn't look like the old Kevin Durant. I'm not talking specifically about him, but you're talking about a team that has championship aspirations. They need to win it now. So how will that affect them in come trade deadline? And that's just another team off the top of my head. Like I said, Miami could possibly want them. Maybe they're in the running. They need somebody like that. All of a sudden, the cliche is deadlines get deals done. Watch out, right? Sit on your hands. We'll see what happens around trade deadline. And James Harden could be out, and the Sixers improve with that deal. So I do want to factor that into my equation for the optimism that I'm having for this upcoming season. Now, to the main piece. Am I wrong when I say Tyrese Maxey's the main piece this year?
Yeah, and I don't think you're wrong at all. And I think
Wow.
another appeal
Now,
to
why would let me stop you? Why would you? Because I think that I got my reasons, but why would you tell the people listening right now, as far as Sixers fans are concerned, that Tyrese Maxey's the main piece, not Joel Embiid this year?
Well, I mean, Joel Embiid is obviously still the MVP and going to be a crucial part. I don't want to diminish that, but I believe for the X factor and what the ceiling of this Sixers team, it is very dependent on Tyrese Maxey. And the thing that excites me the most, and that I believe the greatest stride forward Tyrese Maxey's taking, is simply him realizing how good he truly is. That I think there was a lot of moments last year where he deferred to Joel Embiid and to James Harden, which is obviously understandable. These are two MVP caliber players who are pretty much unanimous in how great they are as players. So it's understandable to take a backseat to that, but it's now his show to run. And I think having Harden away from the team, putting the ball in Maxey's hands more, truly figuring out what this guy is as a player, whether he is a guy that could mold into that point guard role, whether he is at his best as a microwave scorer. I think he exceeds the 25 point per game margin this year. I think we're going to see more confidence in him. He's that good of a shooter. He's a real deal elite NBA shooter. He's got 3-level scoring ability. There's nobody that can match pace with him when he gets a downhill option, and his finishing package around the rim is incredibly impressive. So the rate that he's progressed this far is amazing. He's rolled with all the punches that the Sixers organization has thrown at him as far as roster construction, guys holding out, all the other nonsense that he's had to deal with. It feels like the keys are being handed to him this year, kind of by default with the James Harden situation. And I do think he's truly going to run with this opportunity. And to me, it feels much more about just the evolution of him from a mentality standpoint of finally realizing, like, I'm that guy. It's my time to prove that. And I'm excited to see what that fully looks like.
Now, you've been paying attention to all the things that have been said in training camp, and I know that there was one on my timeline the other day. I think Barnard put it out where Tyrese Maxey was, or Tobias was kind of laughing at, wait, we had him at the dunker spot, like, playing Maxey out of position. What is something that will stand out to Sixers fans? Maybe not people that are buried in the X's and O's, that will be different about Maxey in his game this year. Will it be more of, hey, look, there were times where it was just like Maxey with his hair on fire, just at the top of the key, dribble, get to the rack, throw it up high off the glass, and it falls. I don't expect that to disappear, but will we see more of Maxey pulling up? Will we see more of Maxey getting more of a lane, to drive down versus being on the outside? What is something that we might see tonight and maybe in the next couple of games, first 2-3 weeks of the season here?
Number one, I'm just going to say motion is I don't think it's going to take an advanced basketball mind to take a look at the Sixers and look at them compared to last year. And it's going to look like they're playing a different sport to some extent, that there's so much more freedom as far as guys moving off ball. You look at last year's numbers, Sixers ranked last in the league in cutting. There was so much of a stagnant offense where it was just giving the ball to Embiid and watch. And they had this space the floor mentality of guys posting up at the corners and having these 3-point looks, but that doesn't change the look from a defensive perspective. So I think Nurse is going to do a lot of dribble handoffs with Embiid and Maxey, which basically gives the advantage of getting Maxey downhill before he touches the ball. He uses that burst and can create there. I think there's just going to be a ton more cutting, a ton more motion, and I think that's going to open things up. So as much as Maxey will have the ball in his hand more as a playmaker, I think that he's going to be a guy who is going to advance as a cutter, have these opportunities to play off Embiid in a way that he didn't last year. And I just think as a whole that there's going to be so much more motion and so much more happening within offensive sense for the Sixers and for Maxey specifically.
I'll tell you what, I'm not a basketball guru, but there's no way I would want to be last in cutting
for
in
sure.
the NBA. Like I that doesn't make sense to me, right? You know, like you look at the Miami Dolphins, bring it over to the NFL, they definitely run more motion than anybody. Gee, that looks like something I would like to do, and I'll guarantee it's a copycat league. We know that cliche. How many more teams are we inserting motion more into their offense off of what we're seeing statistically because of the Miami Dolphins, McDaniel down there, right? Like, I don't know. It just makes sense.
Not to stick up for Doc Rivers, but just to give a window into why he thought this way is the tactic behind this was giving Joel Embiid the ball at the elbow. That's the hardest place to double on the floor. That the real problem that Joel Embiid has had is passing out of double teams. That's been a struggle from his career. He has not really progressed in that area as much as I personally would have hoped, and I'm sure that all these Sixers would have hoped at this point. So putting him at the elbow makes it the hardest position to double, and then spacing the floor with 3-point shooters around basically creates open 3-pointers if the team decides to double. In fairness to Doc, the Sixers were first in the NBA in 3-point percentage last year as a team. So that was kind of the battle of making them choose. So either guard Joel Embiid straight up, and he obviously led the NBA in scoring at 33.1 points per game last year, or you bring the double and you create an open 3-point look, which then the Sixers were the number one 3-point team in the league last year. So that was the battle he was trying to play. But it gets a lot more difficult on that come postseason time. That I think that is a regular season kind of tactic. When you get to playoff mode, it's not as cut and dry in that. So I do think adding more motion, having more options, and that's where the personnel comes in as well. Like Kelly Oubre, I think as much as he has his flaws for sure, but I think he's got a better instinct as a cutter than anyone I've seen on the Sixers team in several years, including guys like Matisse, like Jalen McDaniels. And that's probably the guys I think he should be compared to from a standpoint, but he has a real nice nose for how to get to the basket, when to drive, and to create options without having the ball, which is a very valuable skill.
I'll put you up against anybody, man. Great breakdowns across the board. And you're right. I mean, look, Doc had his flaws, but obviously there were some really big-time seasons as far as winning games are concerned. Now, you did bring up something that I didn't think we'd be talking about, but as far as playoffs are concerned and Nick Nurse in the playoffs, like that's got to come into the evaluation of his team from the total, from the start to whatever is at the end of this year. Like, he is a mastermind. He is a basketball savant where – he's not going to just, like, you see it so much with these coaches that they're creatures of habit and they fail to change. Let's steal another example from Major League Baseball, from another sport, with Topper and the way he used Kimbrel. It's like, dude, you don't have to use him. Just because he's on your roster, you don't have to use him. But these guys are such creatures of habit. They're like, he was pitched well. You got us there. We can find a way to fit him in. No, it was a mistake. Nick Nurse, it feels like, if they get to the playoffs and it's okay, now you're in a 7-game series going up against Boston, where one game they do this and the next game they do that, and the next game you got to go ahead and stick and move. And it feels like Nick Nurse can do that more so or better off than Doc Rivers can. Is that fair?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think he's much more malleable in his stylistic outlook of basketball. This is the same guy that won the NBA championship in his first season as a head coach. That is tough to do. And he's a guy that's won it just about every level, at the G League level, in England, in Europe, all these things, which is very impressive. So he is that guy. I do believe he's one of the top 5 coaches across the entire NBA. Absolutely. I think there's an argument for him to be the number 1 if you want to make it. I personally will give Eric Spoelstra the respect there and Greg Popovich right up there as well. I probably would put him as the number 3 spot, but that's a pretty good addition when you're adding that to a team in the offseason. And Nick Nurse's legacy is far from written as a basketball coach. So I think he's coming into Philadelphia hungry, looking to prove and have this team competing as well. So I think it's a great fit here in Philadelphia. I think he's done a nice job of kind of bringing himself into the Philadelphia culture and trying to be as going to games, making appearances, stuff like that. So I believe he's bought in. I believe he's hungry, and I truly believe in the impact he's going to make.
Yeah, it doesn't seem, like forced. He's here. He wants to make the most of it. Of course, this franchise, man, it hasn't resulted in a championship, and I know things went a little south there with the whole process nonsense for a lot of people, but we're still the 76ers, right?
Yeah.
We still are the 76ers. And back in the day, it was definitely looked at in a little different light, but man, it's a proud organization. There's a lot of good people there, and forget Josh Harris, but there's a lot of good people, around the team. So I'm excited. I'm really fired up for this upcoming season. Let's just go. All right. So here's what we got. Look, that's on the outlook and the expectations for at least the first couple weeks, first couple games, first month of the NBA season. Maybe take us up to the in-season tournament. Woohoo! On the other side, let's take a quick time out. We'll come back. We'll fire up DraftKings Sportsbook, take a peek at some props that we'll fire on this evening. Once again, DK showing the Bucks a 6-point home favorite, opened up at 5.5, up a tick there, up to 6 now. No surprises. Definitely the money coming in on the Milwaukee Bucks with the fanfare and the addition of Dame. Total though, 225 up to 227.5. Is that too many points? We'll discuss all that and more. We'll hit on the other NBA game as well going down this evening, the Lakers and the Suns. Plus, we got to revisit what we witnessed last night with Wemby Mania in a loss. All that and more. Sean Barnard back on the other side. Don't go anywhere. We'll keep it going. And I'll just snip it.
Sounds good.
No reason. Yeah. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. All right, welcome back. Fox Sports Ready to Gambler. This is the Daily Ticket on a thirsty Thursday. We got World Series Baseball coming up tomorrow for anybody that cares. We'll be hitting that live on Main Street in Manayunk, our home away from home football Fridays. No more Red October. We're going to be at My Philly House on Main Street in Manayunk. So stop on out. We'll be there from 3 to 6 p.m. And once again, our friends over at My Philly House, if you need a real estate agent, whether you're buying, selling, flipping, just have general real estate questions, trust me when I tell you, hit up Colin Good. He's my real estate agent. It's been from the beginning, and definitely hooking him up with all my friends and family as well. So myphilly.house. All right, Sean, let's go ahead and get with Sean Barnard back with me, of course, Sixers insider for us here on The Gambler. Busy season in front of us. We're going to do some special things with Sean this year. First and foremost, we're going to start our own NBA wing and college hoops wing as well. We're going to get Beef involved on that one. So it's all going to revolve under the show name of Sean Barnard. You want to let the people know what we're going to name it?
Picks and roll right here. So yeah, I'm very excited to get into the whole basketball aspect, kind of grow things. I think Luke Arcani did an awesome job doing it with the Phillies. So I kind of want to grow off that, replicate this in my own right, and take this to the top from a little Sixers wing here on The Gambler. So I'm juiced up and ready to get rolling.
Absolutely. And Beef is already, texting me and tweeting me about college hoops and it's right around the corner as well. So, we're going to combine forces on this one, picks and roll, though, but this is exciting. Of course, you're going to be covering everything NBA and Sixers for us, of course, with the focus on all things Philadelphia 76ers for us here on The Gambler. Speaking of the Sixers, let's talk about tonight's game. On the road in Milwaukee. We've known about this game for quite some time. One thing we did not know till about, 3 weeks ago is that Damian Lillard would be on the Milwaukee Bucks. I mean, in the world of in like the world of dream team scenarios or dream teams that have been built, a lot of times it doesn't work out, right? Like the Golden State Warriors were one of those times where it's like, what's going to happen. They just added Kevin Durant to a team that's already the best in the game. I don't know. Like, I want to sit here and say that this makes so much sense that you got Giannis, who is just the freak, down low, does whatever he wants. Outside, you don't want him shooting, but still, he's a freak. We know that. And you got Damian Lillard, who has unlimited range. So in my mind, I keep it simple. Freak down low, boom, 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 out. Whereas, okay, he had Drew Holiday. Drew Holiday is in that shot. Chris Middleton, like Grayson Allen. If I'm missing somebody off the top of my head, like who else had the capabilities of even bringing anything close to what Damian Lillard's going to bring to this team this year? Damian Lillard, we all wanted him, right? We all knew that he was going to be a difference maker for anybody he went to. I'm kind of glad he ended up in Miami, but I don't know, man, because Milwaukee, it just seems like it's going to be pretty easy for those guys. Not tonight. They'll figure it out, though. Where do you stand? Am I making life a little too easy for the Bucks this season?
Yeah, I mean, in theory, it works perfect. It's going to be different when we see it in actuality, but I do believe in this as a duo. That I think it's going to take some time. It's not going to be seamless from day one, and we're going to have a firsthand look at that as they take on these Sixers to get the debut. But I do think that this is a duo that makes sense. I'm excited to see what Giannis looks like as more of a roller. I think they're going to have a two-man game between Damian Lillard and Giannis, which excites me in a great way. I think Dame is going to stretch the defense in a way that it has not happened previously, just creating spacing in a way. You have to respect him shooting from just about 40 feet out. And there's basically him and Steph Curry are the only two guys that you can throw in that category. The biggest problem the Milwaukee Bucks have had has been half-court scoring, and that's exactly what Damian Lillard brings to the table, that he's a top 5 offensive engine across the entire NBA. You add that to a team, and I also think that the Bucks are in a perfect spot because they have a Giannis defensively behind Dame Lillard and a guy like Brook Lopez, who's incredibly valuable to this team, a guy that I think is perennially underrated, and I'm a huge fan of his game in Brook Lopez. I think he cleans up a lot defensively. He's a defensive player of the year candidate year in and year out. So I'm excited. I think this is the perfect mix. It isn't very exciting to see them sitting at the top of the Eastern Conference, and that's going to be a tough hill to climb for these Sixers. But I do kind of believe in this Bucks duo, and I am excited to see them on the floor.
Where would their biggest flaw be? And can we expose that tonight?
Yeah, I'm gonna be interested to see. I guess wing defense is probably my biggest thing. Like you're asking Chris Middleton to pretty much guard the Jason Tatums or the Jaylen Browns or those styles of players. Drew Holiday handled a lot of that defensive mold. Damian Lillard is far from the defender that Holiday is, but on the flip side is you do add this offensive punch that you can kind of compete with the team on the other end with that thing. So I guess wing defense is my greatest concern with them, but I do think they're one of the more complete teams across the entire sport.
Yeah, and again, we'll see. These things take a little time to figure each other out. But it's funny. Last night I'm watching the Celtics, and Tatum is just so explosive, and I don't think Dame has that pop still left in his legs. And Giannis though is the guy who's going to get the final shot.
I mean, Giannis is the guy. I agree with that. Giannis is absolutely the alpha grade A for them still. It's interesting that, like, it's amazing to me when you think back to that Bucks title run, it really was Chris Middleton hitting a lot of the big shots for them. That he was a guy who operated in the mid-range, created his own, and that is Giannis's like biggest red flag and area of concern is creating his own offense. It never looks easy for him. Like, yes, he gets it done, but it takes a lot of hard work, a lot of physicality, and a lot of just being bigger than guys for him to create his own shot and get his points. That he plays some bully ball basketball. So I do think Dame's going to be stepping up at some key moments. We know him has this clutch reputation. He's hit some really big shots over his career. So I do think there's going to be a lot of moments where Dame Lillard is the guy down the stretch, but I don't think that should diminish Giannis's importance by any means.
Okay, let's talk about tonight's game. Once again, Sixers on the road, catching 6. All the reasons why we listed in that earlier segment is why I believe tonight this is the play for me. If you want to go ahead and give the 6 at home, sure. If people want to think that the Sixers are dealing with all this distraction, knock yourself out. I don't. I think this is going to be a hungry team. I think Tyrese Maxey is going to go out there and score a ton of points. His total is 21. I absolutely am on Tyrese Maxey over 21. That's my favorite play here.
Yeah.
Joel Embiid, I'm curious to know what he's going to do. But again, I think he's going to be challenging himself this evening, and you're going to get the best of Joel. He's not going to be we'll see. It's going to be different with Nick Nurse, but like I still think Joel's going to go for 30 plus, and he'll go over his team total. So if you're giving me that for Maxey and Embiid, what we know, I'm still confident in the unknown and Nick Nurse and all the wrinkles. I don't think that this is going to be a blowout spot by no means. And I think the Bucks are going to figure some things out. Maybe it's a little antsy in that arena as you get, the big piece and all the lights are shining the brightest. And all of a sudden you're trailing by 6 in the third quarter. What's going on? I'm not going to say that they're going to be booing the Bucks, but I just think it's going to be asking too much for it to be this perfect night one. So I'm going to take the Sixers catching 6. Do I think that they'll win this game? I think it's a coin flip. I think it's going to come down to the final minute, as always in the NBA. We will be sweating it out. Could very well come down to free throws, and it's like a 4-5. Next thing you know, somebody's got 2 shots with about 11 seconds. Book this tape, and we'll go ahead and run it. And somebody misses a free throw. Sixers lose by 5. I'll take it. It's a win for me, but that's how I'm seeing the game tonight. I'll take the Sixers catching the points. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I lean your way. Personally, I'll be staying away from either a side or a total in this one. I just want to see both these teams before I'm willing to jump in on it. The total is interesting to me. I lean more towards the over, that I think the Sixers are going to play with far more pace this year than we saw last year. Seems like getting Tyrese Maxey out in the open floor and in transition is a real point of emphasis for Nick Nurse, which obviously makes sense, and he's incredibly talented at. This Bucks team, I agree with you, is going to be some growing pains more so than people seem to be expecting. But there are a ton of player props that I do see value in this game. DeAnthony Melton at over 9.5 points to me is a great bet there. That I think Melton is sneaky, a guy who Nick Nurse is going to unlock almost more so than anyone. That he's a guy that I think DeAnthony Melton, a lot of people have in their head is like this seasoned veteran who's been around. He's 25 years old and still getting better. And he's coming off the best year of his career. His 3-point percentage was really good last year. His finishing around the rim has looked better in preseason. That's a point of concern that was last year for him. But I do think Melton's going to be a guy that's going to be in that like 15 point per game range this season. And the 9.5 feels far too low for me. So I like that. And as I mentioned, the Joel Embiid assist, that's what I'm going to be looking at often this season, that I think he's going to be much more playing some team-oriented basketball. I think there's going to be nights where Joel Embiid is going to be on triple-double watch this year, and that's going to be fun to see for sure.
I saw one game earlier this year in the preseason where Melton got a bunch of shots off. Like I think he had like 16 or 17 shots. And
Yep.
I'm like, okay. So of course, if he's, again, that's preseason. So we don't know what's going to happen. But from the preseason, is that one of the big takeaways is what you learned from Melton and how he's going to be used in this offense? Is there anything else that stood out to you that you could carry over into night one of the regular season from preseason?
Yeah, I think DeAnthony Melton's absolutely one of the storylines, that he's stepping up into this role that James Harden is leaving. He was kind of a fringe starter all of last year, that there was kind of he started enough games that I would basically consider him a starter. But when these Sixers were fully healthy, he was basically the sixth man of this team. As James Harden remains away from the team, it is going to be the Tyrese Maxey and DeAnthony Melton backcourt. And they have a cool little dynamic between them that, for starters, they're very close friends off the court and they seem to hang out a lot, get along well. And then on the court, they complement each other quite well. That DeAnthony Melton is more of the defensive-minded piece, a guy that can pick up some of the slack on the defensive end. And by the way, I would like to point out, I think Tyrese Maxey is a better defender than he gets credit. That, no, he's not perfect, but he's improved in a major way since coming into the NBA. And I think by the end of last season, he was at least a league average defender, which is all I really want to see from Maxey. So, but as far as the original point, I do think DeAnthony Melton's going to be very active in this offense. I think he's going to have more decision-making responsibility than was the case last year. It was kind of a catch-and-shoot three or a finish around the rim was his options last year. I think he's going to have the chance to put the ball on the floor, to potentially play make a little bit and make the right basketball decisions. So I think Melton's going to be far more involved than people realize.
Yeah, DeAnthony Melton here at 9.5, as we pointed out. Joel Embiid 28.5 at -125. I still think he's going to score 30 plus. I know he's got some decent defenders on the other side he'll go up against, some big men, but bottom line is it's Joel Embiid. PJ Tucker 4.5. Haven't mentioned him yet. Don't know anything from PJ. Not talking points here. Is there anything that we should expect different from PJ Tucker? I get it. He's a veteran and, is a guy that you would like to have on your team, but at a much different price. Yeah. I don't know. I think a lot of people are sour on PJ Tucker. Give me one positive about PJ Tucker on the team.
I mean, he showed up in the playoffs when it mattered most, is I guess the biggest thing. That's why he came to this team. He was the guy that had 10 points in that first quarter of that elimination game. And that was like a career or a season high for Tucker. And he banged 3 threes and then had that cool moment yelling at Embiid. He is a guy I like having around this locker room. And I think that there, at some point this season, there will just be like a scrappy unit on the floor headlined by PJ Tucker and Patrick Beverley together. And maybe even Jaden Springer in the mix, because he does have a lot of those similar traits. So he's a guy that I like having around the organization. He's not a guy I would probably recommend putting a wager on at any point this year. That I think he's going to be much more of a playoff performer and a non-box score performer than anything. But I am interested to see if PJ Tucker sticks it out, or if he's a guy that ends up being attached to a Harden trade when it eventually happens.
All right. Not really interested in anything from of totals. 227, as I said, from 225 up to 227.5. Like I said, I'm on the player props. I'm riding with that. I'm not going to get too crazy. It's night one here, just having some fun. Going to enjoy the game. I tried to get a little crazy last night, and luckily, Wimby, which we'll transfer over to in that conversation in just a second, hit 2 3-pointers. So it wasn't an absolute loss, but I thought it was going to be a hell of a lot more of a winning night for me. But oh well. Thanks, Russ. Anything else from the gambling sense of this evening? Yeah, you know what? Let's just real quick take a look at the other side. We haven't even mentioned the Bucks. Damian's 26.5. Giannis is 27.5. Lillard is up to minus 125. Middleton 12.5. Let's see here. Anybody else? Beasley's at 9.5. And Brooke Lopez is 13.5. Now, Lopez, if I'm not mistaken, he was bombing threes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so he's at 1.5, a plus 145. Look at that at all from Lopez?
Yeah,
tonight?
I actually do like that number quite a bit for Brooke Lopez. I love Brooke Lopez. He's one of my favorite players to watch. Splash Mountain, amazing nickname. But he is a guy who's turned himself really into a one of one in the NBA. That when you think of, I feel like often it gets thrown like a Brooke Lopez type player. It's really only Brooke Lopez. Like, this is a guy that's truly elite as a shot blocker and then truly elite as a shooter. That he's like an above 38% 3-point shooter as a real deal 7-footer. That's tough to do. And that's incredibly valuable to what the Bucks do, because what this means for them is offensively, he's able to space the floor and really just be a perimeter shooter, which gives Giannis the space to attack the rim and navigate in the way that he does. And defensively, he's a guy that can rim protect completely, which allows Giannis the freedom to then basically be a free safety and kind of travel around on the defensive end. So Lopez is very much vital to what they do. And I also would like to mention that I do think the Middleton number for points feels a little bit low to me. That it's going to be interesting how that hierarchy of scoring and who gets the touches shakes out. So I understand staying away, but 12.5 feels too low for a guy who has been their moneymaker in the stretch for many points in time for the Bucks. So I do like that 12.5 for Middleton as well.
And it's crazy because the thing about Lopez, I got his numbers up. First of all, 16th year in the NBA. He's been in it forever, since 2008. His first couple of seasons, he didn't shoot threes, and that's understood, right? And then all of a sudden, he just starts firing probably like year 8, year 9 of his career, and boom, 30. Oh, 34%, 34%, 36%, 34% for the Lakers. 33, 35, 37 last year for the Bucks as far as downtown is concerned, 3-point percentage. It's just crazy. Like you said, he is a one of one. So I would look at that number. That's a nice juicy number there. And again, I think he'll probably get up 4 to 5 shots from downtown.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. And he basically is a floor spacer. I mean, last year he averaged 4.7 3-point per game, 3-point attempts per game. And yeah, 37.4%. That's above league average. That's real deal, like high level shooter for a guy of his frame. It's very impressive stuff. And some of it has kind of been the survive and adapt to the modern NBA of learning to be a perimeter shooter. But I do believe this guy's taken it to another extent. And it also shouldn't be forgotten, like his early days, he was legit like a high level post scorer, a guy that when he played for the Nets, that he was a very good player, a fringe all-star type talent, and to turn this into now another successful second half of his career, he deserves a ton of props for. So I'll give Brooke Lopez his love, absolutely.
I like that. Yeah, 4 games so far in the preseason. He has gone over the 2-point mark for 3-pointers 2 times. Total of 3, 6, 2, and 5. So if the volume is there, I'm definitely riding on that one. It definitely has me interested as far as a play this evening. All right, let's keep it moving as far as Sixers for tonight is concerned. And I'm going to take them catching the points. You're kind of just laying low. You don't mind it, but a chance that they go out there and steal game 1. What does it mean?
Yeah, I mean, it would set the tone for the season. And I will say, as a whole, the Sixers have done a very nice job separating the James Harden drama from this team actually building itself. So I think they've done a really good job of that. I think they're going to prove it. I think this team's more connected than people realize. And I do think the Bucks are going to have more growing pains. That for the most part, this is the same Sixers core that knows how to play together, that have shown it in flashes last season. So I do think there's a chance the Sixers come out and punch this team in the mouth early, and then we kind of see what this Bucks team is made of, if they can fight back, if the talent can win out. But I am very thrilled about this team. So I think the Sixers are going to be a team that surprises people in the positive standpoint. And I do think the Bucks are going to have more growing pains. So I definitely lean towards the 6, and I don't count the Sixers out from winning this game as well.
Excellent stuff. Plus 190 on the money line. Nick checking in. Shout out, Nick. Light him up. Over under for Pat Bev technical fouls.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And I mean, we've already seen Pat Bev getting kicked out of a preseason game. By the way, he has absolutely read the playbook for how to endear yourself to Philadelphia, because the two guys that he picked fights with in that Nets series or in that Nets preseason game was Nick Claxton, who's been that back and forth spat with Joel Embiid with the poster, the t-shirt, all those little comments, all those things, and then Ben Simmons. So to kind of go at both those guys, and I love it as well. He was defending Philip Petrusev, was what ultimately got him thrown out. And then Pat Bev went on his own podcast to kind of tell the whole story and elaborate on it. But I do kind of respect his point of Ben Simmons. Like, if you want to talk, come talk to me. Don't talk to this undrafted or late second round rookie who has been a fringe NBA talent and wasn't even guaranteed to make the team. You want to talk trash? Like, I've been trying to chirp at you all game. So I do respect that out of Pat. I love what he's bringing to this team. And I do think from a culture standpoint, like, Patrick Beverley is going to help this Sixers team out in a major way. I've been pounding the table, hoping for him for years, and I am excited that he's actually here.
Yeah, he's definitely one of those guys that I would want on the squad a couple years ago. Right now, I'm like, yeah, but again, we'll see how this team comes together with Nick Nurse's vision. But he's definitely a guy that you would like to have in that locker room, right? Like, there's no doubt about it. But it's interesting, like they have that in PJ Tucker, and now you're adding Pat Bev. So, you need a little bit more, in my opinion, from the totality of the roster. Now you got two guys. Like, what is Pat Bev going to bring to the table when his number is called upon? Is he a backup point guard? Can we count on him to hit a shot? Is it more from the defense? Is it more for the trash talk? Outlook for Pat Bev. And again, I'm not trying to make too much about it because we know who he is at this point in time. But he was a difference maker when he was with the T-Wolves a few seasons ago. Your thoughts on Pat Bev?
Yeah, and the Chicago Bulls last year, that he did really stabilize that team and set them in the right direction. They made it to the play-in and at least had a fighting chance after he was traded by the Lakers and then released by the Magic last year. I think Pat Bev falls in a little bit similar category of Kelly Oubre, that I think there will be nights where Patrick Beverley plays 30 minutes and makes a real impact, and then there will be nights where he really doesn't play at all, and that's totally fine with me. And his greatest impact will be in the cultural sense and in the standpoint of the impact he's making within the locker room. The PJ Tucker thing's interesting. That PJ Tucker obviously is a guy who's labeled as having this dog in him, and he absolutely does. But Tucker's so much of like a lead by example guy that he's just going to leave it all on the floor. He's going to play every game. He's going to dive for loose balls. Pat Bev is much more like expressive and vocal in the way that he leads and the way that he, I guess, expresses his personality to this team. And I think that is important. I think this team needs that more. Like Pat Bev told a story yesterday of like him taking Embiid after practice and saying, let's go do some extra conditioning. Like little stuff like that adds up in the long run. So I am excited for what he brings to this franchise. I do think that he's going to make more of an impact from the mentality standpoint than PJ Tucker has to this point. And having both of them is still a good thing in the long run.
Well, the things that I've heard over the years is that nobody was doing that. Nobody would ever dare go up to Joel Embiid and say, hey, let's get more conditioning.
Exactly.
Everything that I've heard over the years is Joel Embiid is completely separate from everybody. And I think we've all come to realize that. We understand it. We live with it because he is the MVP. But when it doesn't result in a championship trophy, things got to change. So maybe we see some of that this year from Joel Embiid. I think it would go a long way. Doc's been very outspoken about it as well. He continues to talk. As a matter of fact, he was on the call last night. He was on Dan Patrick. I don't know. I don't really want to waste time. We're up against it. We know we're out with the old. We're in with the new, and that's this year for the 76ers. Sean Barnard once again covering all things Sixers and NBA for us here on The Gambler. Let's talk a little bit about the league if we could. Wimby, your first thoughts last night. What'd you think?
I was impressed overall. It wasn't the, I guess, earth-shattering performance I think a lot of people hope for. That there's going to be some growing pains. This guy has to adjust to the NBA pace, the NBA physicality, all those things. But he is one of the most unique players I've ever seen. I mean, it's very interesting to me how the Spurs are using him. Like, he's a shot blocker to a different extent. Like, they almost have him floating around as like a free safety, like blocking jump. Yeah, on the perimeter. Yeah. And the tactic really seems for him to try and block a jump shot and then get down and get post-up position down the other end early. So I've never really seen a player ever used like that. It's pretty fascinating to me. There's going to be some growing pains. He's obviously much more comfortable coming off his jumper. I would like to see him add more of a post game. These are all going to happen in the long run. We're nitpicking after one game, but he does seem to have that air of confidence about him. He does feel built for it, in my opinion. So I'm very excited for what he's going to be throughout the season. And he really is can't miss television. Like I really haven't seen a player like this.
Dude, I was refreshing and I'm like, I know they're delaying it because of the Knicks and Celtics, but do not start this game. And then I'm like, I got it on my computer. And I'm like, I'm not going to miss this tip. I'm not going to miss this tip. I can't tell you the last time I said that about an NBA game, right?
Yeah.
Like I wanted to see the tip with him out there, right? Ooh, hello, pause. Anyways, what I do know is this, like you said, we're not nitpicking over one game. I was definitely intrigued with the whole, dude, you're 7'4" with a wingspan of 8. I need you more down low. Like I have to have you around the rim more. Will
Yeah.
that happen? Of course, he's going to get the intuition. He's going to get more comfortable. I also think that the whistles kind of threw him off a little bit. He got that one bad call. I was watching, but not in great detail, so I missed a couple whistles. He ended up with 5 fouls that completely took him out of the game. Hell, heading into the fourth quarter, he only had 15 minutes played. I know that the whistles had something to do with it, but we also are in the world of how will Pop handle him? He finished with 23 minutes last night, and that had a lot to do with the 5 fouls. But I still believe that Pop thinks he's got a pretty good roster, pretty good depth, and I don't know if he's going to be out there for 35 minutes per game. So I just want to put that out there. Maybe at the end of the season, it's a different ball game, but right now, for the people that are firing on all things Wemby, you might actually want to look at some unders for rebounds and some things that are getting juiced up right now. But last night, 15 points, debut performance in an NBA uniform. Downtown was incredible to watch. He was 3 of 5. His number was over 1.5 at plus 155, if I'm not mistaken. That cashed, hit on that. Took him on a double-double at plus 340. Never had a shot. He did score 9 points in the fourth quarter. The moment didn't get big to him. And also, I love this. As soon as that game was over, he didn't shake hands. He went right to the locker room. Loved it.
Yeah.
Loved it. You know, this is day one. It's your rookie debut. Get that camera, limelight, dap up everybody, exchange jerseys. I'm here. Nope. Right to the locker room. He was pissed. He was pissed about losing the game to Dallas. You got to love that.
Oh, absolutely. And there's no doubt about it. This is a franchise centerpiece for the Spurs. One of the reasons that I've kind of recommended staying away from the Wembanyama Rookie of the Year and a lot of those kind of numbers is because I just think the Spurs are going to be very careful in the management of them, that they're very much taking the long view of it. And the Spurs team, while they have some fun young players, Devin Vassell is a guy who stood out in a major way last night as well. This is probably like a 25 to 30 win team. That this is not the year that they're going to be gunning for it. So they're going to keep that in mind.
28.5 on the win total.
28.5. Yeah, and that feels about right to me. Like that's kind of the mindset for this team is they are taking the long view. So there's going to be some growing pains. I don't expect him to be able to play through the mistakes in a way that some other players might, that they're going to be very much be strategic in the way they add things to his plate. And he also was far from the focal point of that offense in a way that I think people most imagine everything to be catered to Wemby. Devin Vassell's higher in the pecking order. Keldon Johnson's higher in the pecking order. And Wemby got his for sure. But I don't think it's as clear cut like this is his team and we're running with it as people made it out to be.
Agreed. Totally agree. And I like I said, it's going to come with time. And if he's pulling up, hitting threes like that, watch out. And that's just going to open up things for other players. But they got a long way to go. That's not about this year for the San Antonio Spurs. We know that. Nick checking back in. He's got a bunch of takes here. First of all, he says Cam Thomas, most improved player. We're going to go around the league real quick from last night. But Cam Thomas, most improved player. Your thoughts, especially from last night?
Yeah, he looked very good last night. And Cam Thomas is as pure hooper as they come. He's purely there for buckets. I did not love the last shot from Cam Thomas. I didn't love the fadeaway off-angled 3. I know that's kind of his game and what he does, that he's a shot chucker, that he's not taking good decisions with the basketball, and that's part of his charm. But boy, when he gets it going, it's quite a bit of fun, and he did for a stretch last night, absolutely.
36 last night, 13 to 21, 2 of 5 from downtown. Of course, in that loss to the Cleveland Cavaliers. I like Cleveland. I think they got something to prove this year after last year's they lost to the Knicks, if I'm not mistaken. Correct? They lose to the Knicks
yes,
in the playoffs. Yeah.
So.
And that was a disappointing end. I thought that they were the better team there. But staying with Brooklyn, let's talk about Ben Simmons. I got the box score in front of me. Everybody's making it. I get it. People, you made the case the other week on the timeline that people are getting paid to promote them. Might as well.
It's those NBA Central and the Hoop Central accounts that it's like Just treat him like a normal basketball player is my thing. Like, you don't have to just juice up that he's back or criticize everything. Just let him be a normal basketball player is all everyone wants. But it feels like every little highlight or every little clip they're blowing up, and he just is not like he's just not back in the same way. Like, he's still
No.
far from his peak as a player, and I think people are just like either forgetting that or ignoring that.
No, and I got one comment last night when I said he's still a liability on the floor. First of all, I think Nick pointed out he wasn't even on the floor at the end of the game, so that tells you all you need to know, which is correct.
Yeah.
Nice job by Jacques Vaughn, who's the head
Mhm.
coach of the Nets. You got to handle it like
He's a good
that.
coach.
Second of all, I would say that, like, yeah, you the box score was nice, 10 rebounds, 9 assists. It's like, oh, that's great. You would like that, but that's not what you need from him. You need more from him. And like, you can, not to say that 8 and 9 or 9 and 10 is easy, but like the expectations definitely are a little bit different when it comes to Ben Simmons. And we know it better than most. Like that, those box scores will be totaling up all the time throughout the course of those season. You're like, all right, this is great. Regular season. Now what happens come postseason? Now we're in trouble. And if they don't handle them differently from postseason to regular season, that's when the Brooklyn Nets will be in trouble if they do make the playoffs. But last night, I know people were coming at me saying, oh, look, he had a pretty good game. That's fine, but it's still the same old Ben Simmons, so don't make him out to be something different. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, 100%. And he's still showing the unwillingness to create his own points. That there was a moment where he passed out from directly under the basket to a 3-point shot. Like, I get it. It's an open 3-pointer, but dude, you can literally just
Dunk it.
yeah, you're there. And I think he forgets he's 6'10" sometimes. Like, it's amazing. I put it this way a lot, but think about Giannis and Ben Simmons are the same height. That's absurd based on the way that they play and the way that they use their bodies. And Giannis obviously has some more meat on his bones, that he is stronger, all these things. But how drastically different these guys are is just kind of upsetting when you think about it that way. And also, I'd like to point out, Sean Brace, that you and I both attempted the same amount of free throws as Ben Simmons last night.
Giannis is the freak. Ben Simmons is the fraud. That's all I could say about that one. All right. Last thing about last night. Am I too late to say I'm on the Oklahoma City train?
Oh, that train is cruising at this point. But yeah, there's so much fun. Every single player on that roster is fun. Isaiah Joe making his rounds and playing a high level. Cason Wallace off the bench. SGA is the truth. There's so many players that are just fun. Giddey's awesome. Jalen Williams, top to bottom, that roster is awesome. There's so much good young talent there, and they're a team that should be worth watching on a night-to-night basis as well.
What's their ceiling?
I think they could climb even into the middle of the Western Conference. That they're going to be a playoff team this year. I think they exceed, and I think they're going to be slightly above that play-in range. So like in that 6-ish range, 6 seed-ish range is kind of where I see the Thunder for this year.
OKC to make the playoffs for this season right here, right now. I might have to get on this because, like I said, last night I tuned in, I got the ticket, I was watching, boom, or League Pass, whatever we call it. And I was like, ooh, that's fun. Minus 155 to make the playoffs. Minus 155 to make the playoffs. I wonder what their win total is. I just don't. Again, it's probably too late for this because everything gets juiced up, and everybody's been wagering on these for the last couple of months. Their season total or their win total is already off the board because they played last night, and of course came away with that opening season dub. All right, Sean Barnard, fantastic start to the season. Picks. It's picks and roll, correct?
Yeah, picks and roll. Yep.
Yeah, the logo's coming, graphics are coming, everything will be available once again at foxphlgambler.com. We'll get that up there probably tomorrow or definitely on Monday over the weekend. But it's an exciting time. It's a new season for us here, and nobody better to cover it all than you, Sean. Can't thank you enough for a couple minutes today. Enjoy the game. Go Sixers. Get the dub on the road in the Bucks. Any final thoughts for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to check rock and see how these guys look on the floor. So I'm excited. Let's wipe the slates clean. Let's have all hurt feelings and pain from the past behind us. This is the Nick Nurse era. This is a new season of Sixers basketball, and let's approach it as that.
Yeah, and don't play that damn song. Can we get rid of the song?
The Sixers song?
Yes.
No, I'm in on that. That you gotta leave.
I thought you said you wanted to wipe the slate clean.
Yeah, but that one's been entrenched in it. That's not a bad vibe song.
I don't know. We'll see. I'm willing to give it another year, unlike dancing on my own. For Sean Barnard, I am Sean Bray. Stay right here. Daily Ticket rolling on.